I stepped onto my own pool deck and heard strangers cheering inside my fence. The music hit first, bass thudding through the patio tiles. Then the smell, charcoal smoke, sunscreen, spilled beer, hot plastic from cheap pool floats baking in the sun. I froze at the gate because there were people everywhere. Chairs packed shoulder to shoulder. Coolers sweating on my lawn. Kids screaming. A DJ table set up beside my grill like it belonged there. And there, standing by my pool in a white linen blazer like she owned the sky, was Linda. She raised a glass at me with a smile, so smug it looked practiced. "Oh good," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're here. I was about to have security remove you." Security? I almost laughed. Almost. Because I wasn't on HOA property. I was standing on land I bought, land I paid taxes on, land with my name on the deed. And Linda knew that. She also knew something else, something I'd learned 30 seconds earlier when I saw the huge wooden sign staked beside my gate. Public HOA pool event, member access only. My jaw tightened so hard it hurt. The sign was brand new. Fresh screws. Fresh stain. Fresh lie. One of the men near the deep end lifted a drink and shouted, "Best block party ever." That's when I realized Linda hadn't just invaded my yard. She had turned my home into a stage and expected me to play the villain. I kept my voice low. "Take the sign down." Linda's smile didn't move. "This neighborhood voted to open the pool for community use. I'm not in the HOA. A few heads turned. A woman in designer sunglasses frowned like I was the one ruining the mood. Linda spread her hands. "Then you should have joined." I stared at her. "You can't vote to use property you don't own." She stepped closer, heels clicking on my stone deck, and lowered her voice just enough to sound dangerous. "Actually, we can when the covenant grants common access." That was the trap. She had already sent me a fake notice weeks ago, buried under junk mail and junk threats, claiming my pool fell under some shared amenity clause. I ignored it because it was nonsense. My land survey was clear. My title was clear. My patience was not. A little boy ran past me with wet footprints on my deck boards. His mother laughed and told him not to splash the homeowner. I watched the drops hit the wood. My fence, my pool. My pressure tightened when I saw the electric meter box open near the side gate. A contractor I didn't recognize was messing with the lock, probably on Linda's order. That was the moment the whole thing stopped being embarrassing and became real. "Get off my property," I said. Linda took a slow sip of her drink. "You're being hostile in front of witnesses." There it was. The old HOA trick. Smile while you steal, then act shocked when the owner raises his voice. I pulled my phone out, thumb already on the camera. Good. Let them witness this. For the first time, her smile slipped. She glanced toward the crowd, then back at me. "If you call this in, you'll look ridiculous." "Then you should have thought of that before you hosted 180 people on my land." I turned the phone to record the sign, the gate, the party, her face. One clean sweep. One clean mistake. And Linda saw it. That was when she stopped pretending this was a misunderstanding and started looking for a way to make me the problem. Linda's smile should have meant the party was breaking her way. Instead, it looked tight, like a cheap zipper about to split. The bass from her speakers thumped through my fence posts. Paper plates skated across the patio in the wind. Somewhere near the deep end, a kid shrieked with laughter while a beer can rolled through the grass and stopped at my boot. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just trespassing anymore. It was control. Linda stepped closer to the pool, still acting like she belonged there. "You can keep recording," she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "But this is still HOA property." I looked at the gate again. My gate. My lock. My land. Then I pulled out the one thing she hadn't seen yet. The deed. Not a copy. Not a receipt. The original county stamped paperwork, still folded once in my jacket pocket, with my name on it, and the parcel lines plain as day. I didn't wave it around. I just held it where the camera could catch the seal. Linda's face changed. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just enough. Because she knew exactly what that meant. The crowd got quieter in pieces. A woman near the grill stopped fanning smoke off her plate. A man with a red cup lowered it halfway to his mouth and just stared at me. Even the music felt too loud now, like it was trying to cover up a crime. Linda reached for her phone. "You can't prove anything from one document." "Actually," I said, and I could hear how calm I sounded, "I can prove a lot." That was the first crack. I zoomed the camera down the fence line. past the posted no-entry sign she had ignored, past the pool deck, past the cluster of folding chairs she dragged in like she owned the place. Then I pointed straight at the survey marker sunk in the corner of the yard. "County marker," I said. "Set years before your HOA ever painted a sign." She barked out a laugh, but it came out thin. "That marker means nothing." "Then why did you bring 3 extra tables, a bounce house, and a rented sound system onto land you claim you manage?" That hit harder than the deed. Because she had no answer. One of her own board members shifted uncomfortably and looked away. Another started checking his watch like he wanted to disappear. The party had been loud 5 minutes ago. Now it felt like everyone was standing inside a trap they hadn't noticed closing. Linda tried to recover. "If you keep making a scene, we'll have you removed." "By who?" I asked. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, and that silence was better than any apology. I took one slow step forward, and she actually stepped back. That was new. Until that second, she'd been the one expanding, claiming, pushing. Now she was shrinking under the weight of every camera phone aimed at her face. I could almost see her thinking through the damage. Neighbors watching, evidence recording, the county seal in my hand. The pool she had announced as public sitting under a sky she did not control. Too bad for her, I wasn't done. I lifted my phone higher and started narrating every detail out loud. The gate, the signs, the crowd, the plates, the rented chairs, the unauthorized use of private property. Calm, clear, unmistakable. Linda heard every word. And for the first time that night, she stopped looking at me like I was the problem. She started looking at the pool like it had betrayed her. The first thing I did was spread the papers across my kitchen counter like evidence in a murder case. The overhead light buzzed. My printer was still warm. The smell of toner mixed with coffee and wet paper, and every page on that counter said the same thing in a different way. County records, deed history, HOA bylaws, property maps, and a clean little printout proving I was not, and had never been, an HOA member. I ran my finger along the deed line again. My name, my lot, my fence, my pool. Then I laid Linda's favorite lie right beside it. Not adjacent, not shared, not governed. Mine. I took photos of everything with my phone, one by one, the way a man documents a crime scene before somebody tries to clean it up. The survey stakes, the rear boundary marker, the HOA sign at the entrance that somehow stopped before my property began. Then I zoomed in on the membership roster. My name wasn't on it. Never had been. That was the moment the whole thing changed for me. Not because I finally had proof. Because I realized Linda had already been running this party like facts were optional. I walked back outside with the stack in my hand. The bass still thumped through the night air. Plastic cups sat on my stone pavers. A kid laughed too loudly near the deep end. The grill smoke drifted over the fence with that greasy, sweet smell of burnt burgers and charred onions. Linda was still there, standing near the pool like she owned the water itself. I held up the first page. "County deed," I said. "My parcel. My legal boundary. Your party is standing on land you don't control." A few people turned. Linda's chin lifted. "Tradition matters more than paperwork, Ethan." I almost laughed. That line hit the air like she'd practiced it in a mirror. But I kept my voice flat. Tradition doesn't change title. She stepped closer, heels clicking against my patio stone. "You don't understand how this neighborhood works." "I understand it better than you do," I said, and tapped the HOA roster. "I'm not even a member." That got her. Not panic. Not yet. Just a flicker in her face, fast as a match strike in the dark. She reached for the paper, and I pulled it back. Too late. I had already seen what I needed to see. The crowd had gone quieter now. Phones were out. A man near the umbrella table was recording. The woman with the red sunglasses stopped smiling when she saw the map in my hand. I turned the survey toward them. "This fence line is on my property," I said. "This pool is on my property. These chairs are on my property. And this party was never approved." Linda's mouth tightened. "You're making a scene." "No," I said. "You made a claim. I'm just answering it." That was when I heard it. A car door outside the front gate. Then another. Then the low crackle of a radio. Not a neighbor. Authority. Linda heard it too. Her eyes shifted toward the driveway, and for the first time, her confidence didn't look polished. It looked borrowed. I stacked the documents against my chest and watched the front walk fill with headlights. Whatever she had built out here was about to meet the kind of proof that doesn't care how loud a party gets. Boots crunched on my gravel driveway before I even reached the front steps. 2 county trucks sat half-crooked near the gate, their amber lights spinning over the pool deck like a warning beacon. A sheriff's deputy stood by the mailbox with one hand on his belt, while 3 neighbors hovered behind him with cups in their hands like they'd been invited to watch me lose my own home. Linda was already there in the center of it all. She had changed into a bright white blouse that caught the porch light like a spotlight, and she was talking fast, pointing at my pool, then at me, then at the party setup rolling across my lawn. Folding tables, paper lanterns, a giant cooler sweating in the heat. Somebody had even started stringing speakers along my fence line, and the bass thumped through the night like a second heartbeat. "Ethan," Linda called out, loud enough for the whole street. "I told you this was settled." I stopped at the bottom step and looked at the deputy first. "You're standing on my property." He gave me a tired look, the kind men get when they already think the story is complicated. "We're just here to keep the peace." That phrase hit me harder than it should have. Keep the peace. On my land. While strangers set up a 180-person party around my pool like I was the one trespassing. Linda lifted a folder from under her arm and shook it once, crisp and confident. "The HOA voted. The pool area is designated for community use tonight." A woman behind her nodded like this was the most reasonable thing in the world. Another neighbor folded her arms and said, "If you had joined the HOA, none of this would be a problem." I felt my jaw tighten so hard it ached. "I don't need to join something I never agreed to," I said. That drew a few mutters. Not in my favor. One man in a golf shirt actually laughed under his breath. "That's not how neighborhoods work." Too bad for him. I'd spent the last hour learning exactly how neighborhoods worked when people started inventing rules out of thin air. I walked forward slow and deliberate, the documents still pressed to my chest, and I held them up just enough for Linda to see the top page. Her eyes flicked down. For half a second, her face changed. Not fear. Recognition. She knew what was in my hands. I set the stack on the hood of my truck and opened the first page with 2 fingers. The paper made a dry, clean snap in the night air. "You want to tell them who signed the deed for this land?" Linda's smile stayed on, but it looked painted now. "We don't need to make this messy." "That's funny," I said, glancing at the tables, the lights, the speakers, the strangers using my backyard like they'd paid rent. "I was just thinking that's exactly what you already did." A teenager carrying a tray of drinks came up the side path, stopped when he saw the sheriff, then looked at me like I was the obstacle in his way. That tiny look told me everything. The party was already becoming the truth in their heads. The deputy cleared his throat. "Sir, if you have paperwork, we can review it. But for tonight, I'd advise you not to interfere." Not interfere. I almost laughed. My own gate was open. My pool was turning into a public attraction, and I was being advised not to interfere. Linda stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel personal. "You can fight me all you want, Ethan. But right now you're outnumbered." She said it like a threat, like a victory. I looked past her shoulder at the lanterns swaying in the dark, at the folding chairs lining my deck, at the first guests drifting toward the water as if they already belonged there. The smell of grilled meat floated over the chlorine. I pulled my phone out slow, with my thumb already on the county clerk's number, and the glow from the screen painted my knuckles blue in the dark. Linda saw it immediately. Her face didn't change much, but her eyes did. That tiny flicker told me everything. She had been counting on noise, on bodies, on the kind of crowd pressure that makes decent people second-guess themselves. Instead, I stepped to the side of my own driveway, held the phone where everyone could see it, and said, "I'm documenting this right now." The music kept thumping from the pool deck. Glasses clinked. Somebody laughed too loud near the patio rail. But the sound of my voice cut through it clean. I opened the camera and started filming. The county trucks, the orange cones, the folding chairs on my concrete, the buffet table under the string lights. The banner stretched between 2 umbrellas like a joke nobody had bothered to laugh at yet. I panned past the guests, past the lanterns swaying over the water, and landed on Linda standing at the center of it all like she owned the night. "State your name," I said, not loud, just steady. A few heads turned. Linda gave a sharp little smile and lifted her chin. "You already know who I am. Say it for the record." Her mouth tightened. That was the first crack. Behind me, one of the county workers shifted his weight and looked down at the ground. I could hear the gravel under his boots scraping in small, nervous bursts. The grill popped. Grease hissed. The whole scene smelled like smoke, chlorine, and bad decisions. I had already called the sheriff's non-emergency line and left a message. Then I called the county zoning office. Then the property hotline. I didn't beg. I didn't argue. I gave them addresses, dates, and the exact words she had used. Every complaint, every order, every line she had crossed, I put into a text thread and backed it up to cloud storage before anyone could shut my phone off. That was the part she didn't expect. Linda stepped forward like she could still bully the room into forgetting what was happening. "This is a private association matter," she snapped, loud enough for the guests to hear. "We're handling it." I almost laughed. Her authority sounded thinner out in the open. Without the comfort of her office, without the paper shield of letters and threats, she was just another woman standing on land she didn't own, trying to speak louder than the facts. I turned the camera toward the county vehicles again. "You're handling what exactly?" "Because I'm looking at public equipment on my property, a party using my pool, and a board member making claims she can't prove." That word hit hard. Property. A few guests stopped eating. One woman set her plate down on the buffet table and stared at Linda like the floor had opened under her heels. Linda's smile came back, but it was stretched now. Unsteady. "Ethan, don't make a scene." Too late for that. I kept recording. The lens caught her hand tightening around a clipboard. It caught the way her assistant stood half a step behind her, suddenly wishing he was anywhere else. It caught the county truck lights spinning across the wet pool deck, flashing over my reflection in the water like some kind of warning. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered on speaker. "Mr. Hayes?" a woman asked. "This is Deputy Alvarez. We're en route. Stay where you are." The whole deck went quiet. Even the grill hiss sounded louder in that silence. Linda's eyes darted once, fast and sharp, toward the gate. I looked at her and let the phone hang between us like a verdict. She had spent the whole night counting on the crowd. Now she was the one being watched. And for the first time, I saw it in her face. She still thought she could bluff her way out of this. The only question left was whether she would keep pretending when the sirens finally reached the driveway. The first bass note hit my windows like a fist. Then the catering van doors slid open, and steam rolled out into the pool light. Trays of food came next. Chafing dishes, paper lanterns, folding tables. A DJ booth was already humming near the shallow end, wires snaking across my patio stones like black vines. Guests kept pouring in through the side gate in bright dresses, polo shirts, and lawn shoes, laughing as if they'd been invited to own the place. I stood at the edge of my driveway with my phone still hanging in my hand, and the whole scene felt unreal. The smell of charcoal and garlic drifted over the chlorine. Music thumped low and heavy through the deck boards. Someone popped a bottle. Somebody else clapped like this was the start of a wedding. Linda turned toward me with that smug little smile still sitting on her face, but it tightened when she saw I wasn't backing up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't move fast. I just walked to the mailbox post, opened the folder I'd been holding, and pulled out the county survey in the flashlight glow. "This line," I said, pointing at the stamped map, "is the property boundary." A few heads turned. I held up the second page, then the third, then the recorded deed with the seal that caught the light and flashed back cold. "And this," I said, "is my land." The music kept playing for exactly 2 more seconds before I reached over and unplugged the DJ's power strip. Silence dropped, so hard it felt physical. The DJ looked up from his laptop. A server froze with a tray of ribs in both hands. One guest still had a paper plate halfway to his mouth. Linda's mouth opened, then shut again. I walked down the pool steps until I was standing under the string lights, the papers spread in my hands. There is no HOA ownership here. No common area. No public use. No board authority. I tapped the deed again. "And every one of you is standing on private property." That hit harder than shouting ever could. A woman in heels looked down at the pool deck like it had suddenly turned dangerous. 2 men near the grill exchanged a long glance and moved a few feet back. I saw it ripple through the crowd, the shift from party to problem, from fun to liability. People started checking their phones. Some started backing toward the gate. Linda stepped in front of me, chin high, trying to reclaim the room with her body. "You can't just embarrass everyone like this." I almost laughed. "You brought 180 people onto my land and called it public. That's not embarrassment. That's a trespass with catering. That got a few nervous laughs. Not from her side. Behind her, one of the county trucks was still parked crooked by the gate, amber lights spinning across the wet concrete. A deputy stepped out into the driveway, took in the music, the crowd, the tables, and me standing there with the papers in my hand. He didn't need an explanation. He could read the tension in one glance. The first guests reached the edge of the pool and stopped cold. Now they were all looking at Linda. Not the HOA. Not the decorations. Not the catered spread. Her. And the worst part was the thing I could see forming behind her eyes. She wasn't thinking about the deed. She wasn't thinking about the county survey. She was doing math, trying to figure out how far she could still push this before the whole room turned against her. I folded the papers once, carefully, and slid them back into the folder. Because at that moment, the party wasn't the story anymore. The story was that every person on my deck had just heard the words she'd spent weeks trying to bury. And now the crowd knew one simple truth. This pool had never been HOA property at all. I didn't move. The whole deck seemed to hold its breath around me, the bass from the speakers thumping through the boards like a second heartbeat, while Linda stood at the center of my poolside lights with her chin high and her smile stretched too tight to be real. She lifted both hands like she was calming a crowd, like she was the injured party here, like she hadn't just been caught trying to turn my backyard into a public carnival. "Everyone, let's stay reasonable," she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the noise. "There's been a misunderstanding." A few people actually nodded. That made my jaw tighten. She kept going, faster now, feeding on the crowd's confusion. "We have documentation. We have community standards. We have safety concerns. No one wants an incident tonight." Her eyes flicked to the stack of papers tucked under my arm. Too bad for her. I'd already seen the way her face changed when the county records hit the air. I stepped forward until the gravel bit under my boots and the light from the pool painted my hands white blue. "Then let's make this simple," I said. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Every trespasser off my property. Every table, speaker, chair, cooler, and decoration out. Now, the crowd shifted. A man near the buffet laughed once, nervously, and stopped when nobody joined him. Linda's smile cracked at the edges. "You can't just throw people out in the middle of an event. I can when they're standing on land they don't have permission to use." That hit harder than any shout would have. I saw it in their faces first. The hesitation. The sudden math. The way people started looking at the driveway, at the fence line, at the cars parked nose to nose along my grass. Nobody likes being told the fun they paid for might be trespassing. Linda tried a new angle, smoothing her blouse with both hands as if fabric could fix facts. "We're all neighbors here. We're trying to maintain standards." "No," I said. "You're trying to cover up a lie." Her mouth opened, but I kept going. "County records say this pool, this patio, this entire lot is mine. Not the HOA's. Not yours. Mine." A murmur rolled through the crowd like wind through dry leaves. Someone near the back muttered, "Wait, what?" That was when one of the catering guys came out carrying 2 trays of food and nearly walked straight into the line of people backing away from the speakers. He stopped, looked at Linda, looked at me, and suddenly understood he was in the middle of something ugly. He lowered the trays. Where do you want these?" "Out," I said. Linda spun toward him. "Keep serving." He didn't move. That tiny pause mattered. It was the first time the room chose not to obey her. Then another guest stepped down from the deck. Then another. Plastic cups hit the boards. A folding chair scraped backward. The music kept pounding, but the party itself had started to come apart at the seams. Linda heard it too. I could tell by the way she glanced around, counting allies, losing them one by one. She leaned closer to me, voice dropping low and poisonous. "You really want to do this in front of everyone?" I met her stare. "You already did." Her face hardened. For a second, I thought she might try one last performance, some polished speech about rules and board authority and neighborhood harmony. But the crowd was no longer looking at her like she was in charge. They were looking at her like she was a woman standing in the wrong place with the wrong papers. I raised my phone and held it where she could see the screen. "Call them off," I said. "Or I do." "Call who off?" she snapped. "The people you invited. The board. The ones who thought they could use my land because you told them they had the right." A siren wailed faintly somewhere beyond the houses. Linda heard it, and so did everyone else. The first thing that changed was the silence. Not the music. Not the crowd. The silence. It spread across my deck in a strange, ugly wave. Right after Linda's face tightened, and she realized every eye was on her now. The bass still pounded from the speakers, but people had stopped dancing. Forks hovered in midair. A woman near the deep end lowered her cup and stared at me like she was trying to figure out whether I was the problem or the proof. Linda took one step forward, then stopped when she saw the phone in my hand. I kept it raised, screen glowing in the pool light. "You hear that?" I said, nodding toward the siren in the distance. "That sound means somebody finally bothered to listen." Her jaw worked once, twice. She looked past me toward the driveway, then back at the guests, and for the first time all night, I saw it clearly. She was running out of room. Not just on my property, in front of her people. One of the board members, a heavy-set guy in a golf shirt with sweat darkening the collar, shifted his weight and muttered, "Linda, what did you tell us?" That did it. A few heads turned. Then more. The entire crowd seemed to lean toward that one question like it had been waiting in the dark for hours. Linda's smile cracked at the edges. "I told you this was approved." "By who?" I asked. The words came out calm, but they landed hard. Nobody answered her for a second. The only sound was the clink of ice in somebody's cup and the wet hiss of the pool filter dragging water through the system behind us. Then Linda reached for control the only way people like her ever do. "This is private confusion," she announced, loud enough for everyone to hear. "He's upset because he wasn't informed properly." I almost laughed. Upset. That was her answer to a paper trail, a gate, a deck full of strangers, and a siren coming down the street. I lowered my phone just enough to show the county property map again, then tapped the boundary line with my thumb. "This is my lot. This is my pool. And that," I said, pointing at the catering van, "the folding tables, the rented lights, is not your business." A murmur rolled through the guests. A few people actually backed away from the table. Then headlights washed over the yard. Blue and red flashed between the palm trunks, across the water, across Linda's face. A patrol car eased up the driveway. The whole party froze. The officers got out slow, hands near their belts, scanning the scene. One of them looked at the crowd, then at the decorations, then at me standing barefoot by my own pool with a phone full of receipts. Linda tried to step in front of them. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding." "Ma'am," one of them said, cutting her off. "We were called about an unauthorized gathering and a property dispute." He glanced at my phone when I held it out. That was the mistake she made. Not the party. Not the lie. The certainty. The kind that makes people think the truth will wait its turn. The officer took one look at the documents, then at the board members, then at Linda. "Whose land is this?" No one spoke. Not her. Not them. Not the man with the sweat-dark collar. I answered for all of them. "Mine." The word hung there like a lock clicking shut. One of the guests actually set his plate down and stepped back from the table. Another woman pulled her child closer. The board member in the golf shirt stared at Linda with open panic now, like he'd just realized he'd shown up to the wrong crime scene. And Linda was still trying to smile. That made it worse, because now everyone could see it. The order in her voice had been borrowed. The authority in her posture had been fake. The whole night had been built on a lie she expected everybody else to swallow. The first thing that changed was the silence. Not the music. Not the headlights cutting across my driveway. The silence. It fell over the pool deck in one hard, clean wave when the sheriff's cruiser rolled in behind the gate, and the red-blue lights started flashing across the water like broken glass. Linda's smile froze in place. One of the women near the snack table actually stepped back from the railing. The board member in the golf shirt lifted both hands like he was already trying to wash himself clean of it. I stood there by my own fire pit with my phone in my hand and my folder under my arm. And for the first time all night, nobody looked at Linda like she was in charge. 2 deputies got out. I watched the taller one take in the folding tables, the catered trays, the speakers thumping under the string lights, the kids in borrowed floaties, the cases of beer sweating on the stone patio that had been sitting on my deeded land since sunset. He looked at the crowd. Then he looked at the gate. Then he looked at me. I raised my folder. "Evening, deputy," I said. "I'm Ethan. This is my property." Linda snapped out of it fast. "No, this is HOA common area." The deputy didn't move. "Ma'am, do you have proof of that?" She laughed, but it came out thin. "Of course I do." She reached for her clipboard, and for one wild second I almost admired how hard she was trying to keep the lie standing. Then she opened it. Empty copies. No survey. No recorded easement. No county plat. Just pages of meeting notes and her own notes written in a sharp little hand that suddenly looked ridiculous under the flashing lights. I handed over my packet before she could recover. County map. Property record. Fence permit. Photographs. The notice I had mailed the board. The certified receipt. And the email chain where Linda had told them, in writing, that this pool was available for community use. The taller deputy read it once, then again slower. That was the moment the whole party started dying in real time. A man near the grill shut it off. The smell of charred meat drifted up, heavy and greasy, and for the first time I noticed how wrong it smelled mixed with pool chlorine and wet concrete. A little girl at the shallow end climbed out and hugged her mother's leg. Someone in the back was already whispering, "Oh no." The deputy asked Linda, "Did you authorize a party on land you don't own?" She opened her mouth. Nothing came out, because the truth had finally arrived in uniform. Then the second deputy walked straight to the table where the board member had stacked the party permits. He flipped one over, checked the address, then checked the lot number on my map. He looked up and said, flat and calm, "This address is not HOA property." That was enough. One sentence. That's all it took. The woman by the drinks table covered her mouth. The golf shirt guy took a full step away from Linda like she was contagious. She turned on him, then on me, then back to the deputies, as if she could still steer this with her voice alone. "It was a misunderstanding," she said. I almost laughed. Misunderstanding. That was a generous word for trespass, misrepresentation, and a whole lot of people who showed up to party on land they never had permission to enter. The taller deputy told everyone to clear the deck and move toward the street. The DJ cut the music mid-beat. The bass vanished so fast it left a ringing in my ears. Folding chairs scraped concrete. Plastic cups tipped over. The whole crowd started backing out in a messy line, suddenly very interested in the sidewalk, the gate, and anywhere else that wasn't my pool. Linda stayed planted. Then I did the one thing she never expected. I walked past her, unlocked the side gate myself, and swung it open wide. Not for her.